Welcome to No Compromises, a peek into the mind of two old web devs who have seen some things. This is Joel.
And this is Aaron.
I find myself digging into source code, especially in Laravel, but sometimes in packages, and I like it. I like knowing how things work, how they're constructed, and sometimes you bump into things that maybe you didn't fully understand or expect. And so I
Mhm.
want to talk about an example of that because I think it's something that's pretty common in Laravel. And I don't know, I would say maybe could bite you if you didn't understand this. So what am I talking about? The stringable API in Laravel. It's nice, it's certainly it adds some convenience and some like a nice fluent API on top of a string, which is something we use all the time in PHP. And so if we reach for that, there are some scenarios where it might do something we're not expecting. And Aaron, I'm going to hand it to you because you're our resident security expert.
Well, first of all, when we talk about the stringable thing,
Okay.
remember it's not only an API, but it's also an interface for other sort of things.
Okay.
So when you create a string using like some of the Laravel helpers, you can then convert it into stringable, and you can have things like that. So that's where you get that API. When you have other objects, you can convert them into stringable, which doesn't necessarily have all the same APIs, I believe, as like the string object in Laravel. So I think it's a very like a unique, special difference there.
All right. Let me this. I know this is like horrible, but let's just talk code for a second in audio format. Like what I'm thinking of is like str colon colon blah, from, and then you pass it a string. Is that the API we're talking about? Just to make sure we're on the same
Well,
page.
that's the API version of it.
Okay.
After you do all that, you could possibly get a number of different results from that, whether it's a pure
Oh,
string or
okay.
different things. And that's how some of the Laravel helpers work too. Like
Yeah.
you can pass in something, you might get an object back, you might get an array back, you might whatever. And so most of
Yeah.
the time, you're right. Sometimes it's something different, I think, with string. But what I'm saying is, regardless of str's helper, the stringable thing is a lower level thing which can be applied to other things besides just a string helper.
Okay. I think that's a good distinction.
Yeah. And so I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the stringable itself
Yeah.
because that's where we wanted to focus on there. And you're right, Laravel does some great stuff. It gives a lot of helpers with these APIs. When you have implementation of this object, the stringable object with your class, then it gives us some other helpers on how to work with that as a string format. Not necessarily everything that's stringable has a native string representation. And so there's all these kind of cool things. It's way deep
Yeah.
conversation that I don't want to
Yeah.
get into. One of the cool things, though, from a security point, is what you brought up, is Laravel's Blade does a lot of automatically escaping strings for us. So when you have a variable, whether it's from your own code or from user input or something, and you go and echo it to the screen, do the Blade output syntax, Blade is automatically going to escape that for you, which basically means that it's going to stop any sort of HTML injection, sort of, things that you
Yeah.
don't necessarily want to be rendered in there from user input.
Like one of the classic examples, somebody types, a script tag into their notes field, and now it echoes out for somebody else, and now they have a live script tag. Like it's preventing
Yeah,
that from happening. You literally
yeah,
see angle bracket script in the rendered output because it's escaped.
yep, yep. So what's nice about that then is when you have known information that maybe you've constructed, or you have HTML information you've constructed, it can get really difficult to kind of output that within Blade. So you end up like turning off the escaping and doing other sort of syntax. If it's a stringable object, you can just use a normal API inside of Blade, say, echo this out as a variable, and it'll recognize if it's stringable, it'll call that the toString function of it, and that'll give you maybe perhaps plain HTML that'll inject it into your Blade, which is really nice for CMSs and things like that. So you're
Mhm.
maybe doing something inside of a WYSIWYG. You get this HTML inside of your database. You want to display it on the screen. It comes back. You put it in stringable, and you just echo it in Blade, and everything's perfectly fine, except when it's not.
So let me just make sure I'm tracking, because I'll be honest, this is like a new thought to me. You brought this to me, and I did not. understand this before you talked about it. So normally, if we're looking at a blade template, I could distinguish between the safe escaped output, the two curly braces surrounding the variable, and the raw unescaped output because it's like there's literally exclamation points in it, right?
Right.
Is it
Yep.
like
Yep.
single curly brace and then two exclamation points? So like at a glance, I can look at this and know, oh, this is bypassing the normal blade safety behavior. But you're saying with the stringable, I'm still just going to see the two curly brace normal output, and maybe I'll just see like $ notes, and I won't know just by looking at that it's a stringable. But if that
Sure.
contains HTML, under the hood, Blade will essentially do the raw unescaped output just kind of behind the scenes for us.
Yeah, which is again a feature and a benefit.
Yeah,
But we have to remember again, it's our responsibility to sanitize data that we receive from third parties. So from your users, from an API, things like that. So if you go and get a user input and you save it to your database and then you output it and you're using it as a stringable and they've put in that script tag or something like that, well, that'll render directly in line and cause the security issue.
got it.
So
Okay.
it's important to understand also that we keep talking about how Blade does these great things automatically for you. It does these great things automatically for you as a protection layer on top of all the other things you should be doing as a
That's right.
developer, which is
Yes.
to make sure your data is clean and secure and safe.
Yeah, in a perfect world, you'd have some input validation that you wouldn't even let them save a script tag, like regardless of the fact that you're going to escape it on the way back out of the system. Like, yeah, so that's what you're saying. Like, this isn't the
Yeah.
only thing we're relying on for security of user generated input.
Yeah. So I think kind of wrapping this all up, I like the way that you mentioned you like to dig into the source code.
Hmm.
That's the only reason why I know this because I
Uh-huh.
was looking at some source code and I was like, I don't understand how this is outputting HTML.
Oh,
And
okay.
then when I went and looked at how the blade was rendering, and I said, "Oh," and then my security brain said, "Oh." And then of course I was like, "Oh,
So, yeah, I appreciate you connecting the dots. So, just out of curiosity, like, if you did not want this, if you did not want this behavior, like in when you're passing the stringable into Blade, like into the view from your controller, for example, if you did a two string or something beforehand, now it's just a string containing HTML going into Blade. The normal output will escape it, correct?
yeah, you could do that
Yeah.
definitely."
So there's ways around this. Like if you want to, if you
Well,
want to,
again,
if you don't want the
again,
behavior.
yeah, think about if you haven't escaped your user, if you haven't filtered your user input, and you did that though, it's going to be just rendered escaped HTML
Yeah.
inside of the blade. Then, so you'll see p tags and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Probably not what you want. Like you said, this is probably doing what you want in the normal circumstance. But I'm glad you brought it to my attention and by extension to everyone else's. You know how there's like different months to bring awareness to different things. Like I know that's a
Yeah,
vague
yeah.
topic, but
Mhm.
okay.
Yep, yeah.
So
People like to make their point every couple of months. Like, here's my topic I want to talk about, and this
yeah,
month we kind of focus on that. Some businesses get involved, sometimes
sure.
whatever. I get that. Yeah.
So apparently, I learned this from my family. There's a like an environmental thing. I guess it's to like help the bees, where you don't mow your yard for
Oh
the
yeah.
month of May. No mow
Hmm.
May. You've heard of this?
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
have not heard of this. Okay, I hated the idea. Um, but I'm like, you know what?
But do you have a riding lawnmower or a push
I do.
mower? And so you have a riding lawnmower, and
Yeah,
you enjoy riding it?
I do. It's like
All
my
right.
my
Well,
moment
so
of
that's why you hated.
quietness.
Yeah, that's why you hated the idea. But go
Yeah,
on.
exactly. Don't tell me I can't do the thing I like doing and that makes our house look nice. But anyways, so
And
I
kills the bees.
and kills the bees. I mean, you got to break a few eggs to make an omelet. Is that a anyways? So I didn't. It's what as of recording, we're halfway through the month of May. And I have not mowed, and now it's starting to look pretty ratty. Like we're the only house in the subdivision that has not mowed. And now I'm like, they want me to mow. I'm like, no, I'm not doing it. So I've been resisting. I'm like, this is what you wanted. This is what you're gonna get, just to prove a point. But I had somebody come over and they're like, is your lawnmower broken? And I'm like, no. And I explained everything I just explained here. So um, she said to me, a friend of mine, she's like, if you're doing no mow May, you're supposed to put like a sign in your yard
Yeah,
so
yeah,
your neighbors don't just think you're lazy and
right.
and
That's
don't
why I knew
care.
about it because I've seen like some yards and they have a sign. I was like, what?
But I'm just thinking, like, I could just make up signs for all sorts of things I don't want to do anymore. And does that make it socially acceptable?
How about a sign for no podcast now? Sometimes it's nice to have just a little quick tip to learn about something like HTML Stringable and why it should matter to me.
Well, do I have the thing for you? Head over to masteringlaravel.io and you can sign up for our daily tip newsletter where each article is about 2 or 3 minutes to read.